The 80s were a time of materialism and consumerism as Madonna sang about it. Thanks to the emergence of major cable networks like MTV, the rise of the yuppie came in the 1980s, while blockbuster movies were everywhere, from music videos to gaming systems. This decade was full of technological advancements and iconic moments. All you have to do is check out these 20 iconic moments from the 80s in these nostalgic photos. Prince Charles and Princess Diana's wedding. The wedding of the decade was that of Britain's Prince Charles to Lady Diana Spencer, who became known worldwide as Princess Diana. The wedding took place at St. Paul's Cathedral in London on July 29, 1981, and the United Kingdom declared a national holiday so people could tune into the event. About 750 million people around the world watched the wedding on television. An Olympic victory over the Soviet Union. The end of the Cold War would not come for another decade. However, on February 22, 1980, came a psychological victory of the U.S. over its foe, the Soviet Union, when an ice hockey team made up mostly of college students and amateurs defeated the Soviet Union's team. Sports Illustrated says the win was the #1 sports moment of the entire century. The U.S. team went on to win a gold medal at the Winter Olympics held in New York State. John Hughes Cult Classics. In case you are living under a rock, you probably have a favorite 80s movie, and chances are good John Hughes is to thank. He was one of the several people who owned cinemas in the 1980s. Sure, you might not recognize his face, but he was the director of The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off and others. Cubans begin fleeing to the U.S. in the 80s. The Cuban Revolution occurred in the 1950s. In April 1980, another mass wave of Cuban refugees to Florida began. Over 125,000 Cubans made the perilous journey, often in overcrowded boats that were in danger of capsizing. Dozens of people died on the journey to find a better life for themselves and their families in America. The eruption of Mount St. Helens. Scientists largely believed Mount St. Helens, located in Washington state, to be a dormant volcano. However, an earthquake led to a massive eruption that caught the world off guard in May 1980. Lava flows, pyroclastic flows, mudslides, and ash that rained down on the local area led to the deaths of 57 people. CNN gave birth to cable news. The decade of the 1980s began with a new form of reporting that has since then become ubiquitous: cable news that broadcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. CNN was the first cable news network. The letters CNN literally stand for Cable News Network. Debuting on June 1, 1980, the first news anchors were the husband-wife duo Lois Hart and David Walker. Fire and Ice with McEnroe and Borg. The tennis match between Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe in July 1980 became known as one of the greatest Wimbledon finals in history. Borg was the reigning tennis champion and won, and McEnroe was a relative newcomer who had charged his way up to the finals. Borg's calm personality against McEnroe's hot-headedness led to the competitors being known as Fire and Ice. Sebastian Coe at the Olympics. At the height of the Cold War, the 1980 Summer Olympics were held in Moscow, Russia. Sebastian Coe, a British runner, won a surprise upset in the 1,500-meter final in what was considered one of the most memorable moments of that year's games. He went on to British politics and put in the winning bid for London to host the 2012 Summer Olympics. The Shipyard strike in Poland. Poland was a country in the Soviet Union under communist rule, but workers scored a major victory in August of 1980. Lech Walesa organized a strike of shipyard workers in a bid to improve working conditions for people across the country. The strike led to the ability of workers to form unions so that they could collectively bargain for more rights and better working conditions. Pac-Man debuts in the 80s. In October 1980, Pac-Man debuted at video game arcades across the country and became an instant smash. The hungry little robot has to eat as many white dots as possible while avoiding the ghosts who will kill him. The game became so popular that within the first 15 months of its release, the parent company sold over 100,000 arcade units. Goodbye, John Lennon. John Lennon, one of the Beatles, was shot and killed at the entrance of his apartment building in New York City on December 8, 1980. A police car rushed him to the nearby Roosevelt Hospital, but he had already passed away upon arrival. Mourners all over the world gathered together in New York City to lament the passing of one of music's all-time greatest legends. The release of U.S. hostages. In November 1979, militant Iranians who had been galvanized by the Islamic Revolution, that deposed the American-backed Shah earlier that year, stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took dozens of Americans hostage. Some were soon released, but 52 were held for 444 days. They were finally released on January 20, 1981, and flown back home. The MASH finale. Everyone from the 70s knows all about the popular show MASH, a Korean war-based sitcom. However, the finale episode aired in 1983. At the time it had a record-breaker number of views, 125 million. It is still one of the most watched finales for any TV series. The unfortunate passing of Bob Marley. Bob Marley was the iconic musician who sang "Don't Worry, Be Happy." He developed skin cancer on his toe in his early 30s, and by the time he was 36, it had spread to his vital organs and caused his untimely death. He died on May 11, 1981, and the world hasn't been quite right since. NWA and Parental Advisory. Beginning in 1986, the rap group NWA was a driving force on the hip-hop scene. In 1988 they released the album Straight Outta Compton. It was one of the first albums to receive the Parental Advisory sticker, which emerged in the 80s. The Black and White label warns parents that the music contains explicit lyrics. The controversial rappers spoke about real-life situations that affected them. New York City's Blackout. On September 9, 1981, a massive blackout in New York City cut power to the New York Stock Exchange and the American Stock Exchange, and also put the city's subway system out of commission. New Yorkers had to walk home from work that day, many of them across very long distances. The blackout lasted for about 4.5 hours. Mrs. Robinson at Central Park. On September 21, 1981, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, the hit 1960s duo known as Simon and Garfunkel, performed a reunion concert in New York's Central Park. 500,000 fans showed up for the concert, making it the largest gathering there up until that time. They played Mrs. Robinson, one of their all-time hits. A female on the Supreme Court. Sandra Day O'Connor made history when, on September 25, 1981, she became the first female justice to be appointed to the United States Supreme Court. She told NPR's Fresh Air, "I felt a special responsibility as the first woman. It became very important that I perform in a way that wouldn't provide some reason or cause not to have more women in the future." Here she is with her husband, John, as Supreme Court Associate Justice. Chief Justice Warren Burger swears her in. The first personal computer. Computers, which had previously taken up entire rooms and had to be operated by specially trained programmers, became accessible to the public when, in 1981, IBM launched the first personal computer, the 5150. Its retail value was $1,500 over $4,000 in 2022 dollars, and the machine weighed 25 pounds, considered lightweight at the time. The Ireland hunger strike. Bobby Sands, pictured here, was a member of the IRA. He had been imprisoned in Maze Prison in Belfast for an uprising against the British government during a period of upheaval known as the Troubles. When the British government removed the special category status of him and his fellow prisoners, he began a hunger strike that led to his and 9 other deaths from starvation. Riots and more recruitment for the NRA followed against British troops in 1981 in Northern Ireland.